Hello, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. Today's presentation is entitled Property Management Software That Delivers. My name is Brian Siefkes. I will be moderating today's presentation. Most of you on this call, I'm sure you know who Sage is. Of course, we've been around for over 50 years. We're the most trusted name when it comes to things like pre-construction, finance, and operations. Thousands and thousands of customers have relied on us, and so definitely a name to be remembered as you're out there evaluating some new applications for your business. Wanted to take a second to talk about some recent announcements from Sage. A lot of times when we go to these events, I realize that sometimes our press releases don't make it all the way everywhere. So it's a good opportunity to talk through some of the recent things that we've been up to. Probably the biggest and most prominent one is about 4 or 5 years ago, the launch of our cloud financial product built for the construction industry. So this is built on the Intacct product platform, which is pretty significant given that it's the only AICPA endorsed accounting platform. And obviously this is built by the folks that you trust at Sage. So this is a full featured job costing construction accounting package. One of the two more recent things that we've launched in association with this is an essentials bundle, right? So this is for those of you out there that are maybe still using a QuickBooks application or some type of generic accounting platform, but maybe don't feel like you're ready to jump up into a full-fledged or more larger scale product. The great thing about our essentials bundle is it gives you everything that you need to run a construction business, but priced based on licenses and usage and things like that for those smaller companies. We're also preparing to launch, haven't launched it yet, but you guys get a little sneak information here on our specialty contractor bundle, right? So this is geared more towards those types of companies that do that specialty subcontractor type work. Our real estate product, which I'm not going to get into too much here because you're going to get a full earful of it here coming up. And construction management, right? So this was a CoreCon application that we purchased back in 2023. We have relaunched that as Sage Construction Management, and this has become a very popular application. Covers a lot of different areas for construction management. So this is something that if you're in the market for a construction management application, this is something you'll want to take a look at. Bid Matrix, so this is probably our most recent news. We acquired the Bid Matrix company. This plugs in very well with our estimating platform. Couple that with our AI-powered e-takeoff tools, and your pre-construction setup is going to be top in the industry. Of course, everything that we do is backed by our partner network, and I think this is probably the thing that we're the most proud of, and that is our extensive network of partners that are, born and bred in this construction industry. And it's one thing to buy a software application and start using it and change over from your old application, but it's another thing to really grow your business, right? And that's what our partner network does. It doesn't just get you up and running in a new application. It helps you achieve your business goals. So hopefully you're speaking with one of our partners as of today, but of course, if that's something that you need to be arranged, that's something that we can do for you. And just quickly here, we work with the entire construction ecosystem. And as you can imagine, that's a lot of different types of companies out there: home builders, GCs, residential developers, real estate, energy, really, you name it. And this is an area that we will typically work in. Okay, so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Dom. Dom, I'll make you a presenter.
All right, thanks very much, Brian. Well, thanks everybody for your time and attention today for this presentation. The whole idea here is that we want to make sure that those of you that have been utilizing the Sage 300 CRE property management module are able to see that if you're interested in a path forward to a complete SaaS-based application, Sage Intacct Real Estate will deliver that for you in place today. So I've got a few things that I want to just cover, our quick agenda that we'll go through today. We're going to go through what markets we serve and serve best. We're going to go through a detailed product demonstration and overview, why we think lease-based is better. We'll talk about lease management and how we think that's a whole lot easier with SIRE, which is just an acronym for Sage Intacct Real Estate. Then we'll go through what future releases we're coming up with for this calendar year. So first and foremost, the markets that we serve, what you'll see here is certainly the commercial market. So we track all the details for all of your leases. So much like Sage 300, we are very lease-based. We think we've made this even easier to use with the modern user interface that has been developed in accordance with Sage Intacct. But we'll handle everything for all of your office leases, rent steps, CAM reconciliation, property tax, all of those things. For your industrial properties, from triple net to gross leases, we'll have everything handled there. We do have percentage rent capability inside the system for all those retail tenants that you may have. If you've got medical office buildings, we'll make sure we handle those also and track some of those pesky ownership issues that can come into play with some of those. From a residential perspective, we've got everything from a market rate perspective, all things conventional, to make sure that we can handle that. And with some coming enhancements, we'll even do a better job around renewal scenarios and those types of things. Affordable housing is a little bit down the road for us to make sure that we can track all of that detail. We do have it tracking all assistant payments and such today. It's just around doing recertifications of income that we would need to add some additional functionality in. And certainly any condo management or single family home rentals, those types of things, we can handle all of that with the product as it is today. So it's a comprehensive system that we've built. You know, what you'll notice is that a lot of systems out there still follow this old methodology of creating a property, sectioning it into rentable spaces, whether those are units, apartments, whatever the case may be. And then they move tenants or residents in and out of those units. Well, we certainly go through and we organize things in a similar manner. However, we create the property, we section it into those rentable spaces that we talked about, units, apartments, storage spaces, whatever the case may be. And then we have a separate database table for your tenants or residents. And in between the two, we drop a lease table, because really when it comes down to it, administering the lease is what we're all about with the real estate world. We want to make sure that we maximize all the revenue possibilities that there are, so that we can make sure that we contribute to the bottom line of net operating income just as much as possible. So by putting the lease information in that table in between the units and the tenants, we now have the ability to draw that information together, not just in a one-to-one relationship, but in a many-to-one relationship, or even a one-to-many or many-to-many relationship. So it's easy for us to make sure that we can track if we have one tenant with 2 units, and we can track that information. But from a rent roll perspective, still show unit by unit the appropriate details that that tenant has at each one. So if they have different step-ups in rent, different CAM reconciliations that are being tracked by unit, we can make sure that we get down to that detail and report it that way. We'll then go through the rest of the task menu today. How do we generate our monthly fees, late fees, handle recoveries and details, all of that. And then when it comes to reporting, we want to make sure that we're tracking all the details around rent rolls, lease expirations, so on and so forth. And what we're about to release is the ability to do some custom reporting inside Sage Intacct Real Estate. So you won't just be using standard reports, you'll have the ability to have custom reports delivered. And then in the subsequent releases, we'll even enhance that capability further so that end users can build their own custom reports. Also, I'd like to make sure that everybody on this call is aware we have data conversion available from Sage 300 CRE. We can bring over your active properties, units, tenants, residence, and lease information and bring that over into Sage Intacct Real Estate so that you are ready to go with this latest and greatest product. So we talked about that lease structure. I wanted to show a quick screenshot here. We will go into the product in detail, but the whole idea here is by being fully lease-based, now we can track everything from sublease spaces, expansion on the premises with different base years or stops or expense pools or any of the case may be, what sort of roommates we might need to handle as changes come up there, and then detailed lease options that we'll make sure that we handle on a lease by lease basis. So let's get in here and let's take a look at Sage Intacct Real Estate. So what we see here first is a dashboard. And I always start with this dashboard because it does a nice job of presenting the ability to show property, tenant, GL information all on one dashboard. So as an example, I'm taking a quick look here and I see I've got my performance cards up at the top. So within Sage Intacct, you have the ability to create performance cards and then put those key performance indicators that you want to track inside those performance cards. So I simply have here rental income this year to date, and how did that compare to last year? That's just a metric that you're able to devise as you build that performance card. You might choose to compare it to budget. You might choose to compare it to last year's year to date, or this month versus this month last year. All sorts of different scenarios and options exist. Then we see cash and AR. Then I get a listing of my property, and I can see within this portfolio my property names, the addresses, what type of property are they, and even the units and square footage and all of those types of things. And when did we acquire it? What's the investment on our balance sheet? And if we have any debt, what does that debt look like? Now, because this drills directly into GL, if we are making fully amortized payments on those loans each month, this amount in my note payable account will continually decrease as we make those payments each month and we amortize that loan. If they're interest-only loans, those dollar amounts will stay there the same. And then, of course, if we want to track fair market value, we can easily go through and add that in here as well. And all of this has drill downs available. So as an example, if I go into a particular property name and drill down, it takes me to some of that property information. And there's even a tab here called acquisition details. Those are all user-defined or custom fields that we can easily go through and add into the system. So it's easy to go through and track all of that. Next, I see my property expenses on a waterfall basis. So I can see here that I've got 1.2, almost 1.3 million in expenses so far, and I'd like to know how much of that will I be able to recapture through my CAM recoveries, or how much of it will I have to bear if I'm the owner or developer of this property. So by using the user-defined GL groupings at the bottom, you can easily see, well, taxes and insurance, I'll be able to bill back, management fees, operating and maintenance expenses, utilities, payroll. May not be able to bill back payroll. And that's a pretty big line item. So it's easy for me to be aware of it. And because these GL groupings are completely user definable, you have the ability to name those reimbursable, non-reimbursable if you'd like, to make it even that much clearer what dollars you're going to be able to recover versus what dollars you'll have to expend. We got a simple little rent roll listed over here with some square footage and deposits and things like that. I'm going to show you a better one in a few minutes. So that's one example of a dashboard. Another simple example is as I go in here, I look at my property portfolio, and now I see a filter bar that's shown up. It's not that I couldn't have had the filter bar here on the first one. That just wasn't chosen in the options of the dashboard. I can add it at any point just by clicking the little gear here. And now I see what date would I like to see this dashboard for, and What property would I like to see it for? So you have the ability to very easily come in, choose a particular property or an entity that may have multiple properties underneath it, or we can even go in and build user-defined groups as well. So if we wanted to show all of our office properties together, we could do that, or all of our residentials and so on. And then next, what you'll notice is we have a couple other fields available. We have our tenant filter and our lease filter. And what this lends itself to is a discussion on what are called dimensions. Sage Intacct utilizes a dimension functionality with every transaction that is recorded. And I heard someone say this once, and I think it's a great example. Dimensions tell the story of the transaction. So when we look at a transaction, we can instantly know where it came from, who did it, and what it's about. So as an example, from a real estate perspective, what we do is we hit with the dimensions of the entity, the property, the tenant, and the lease. And now that dimension capability means in the GL, I can easily filter on any of those. It also means I can budget at that level as well. So if I'd like, I can actually budget down to a detailed lease level and then do variance reporting at a lease level if I'd like to also. So let's see what some of that looks like in action. So here I see AR versus last month, net operating income. What is that like this month versus that same month 1 year ago? That's important for us to be aware of because it's trending up by 4.2%. So now the value of our assets should be increasing depending upon changes in cap rates. And as we all know, with the way interest rates have gone up and such, there are some other factors that come into play there. What do our expenses look like and what does revenue look like? And now I can scroll down here and see a 12 trailing month financial statement. So I can see here very easily for this property, for the last 12 months, what do things look like month by month by month. And because everything's in blue, and I already mentioned, anything in blue is a drill down, I can drill in here and I can see what makes up all of that activity. So now I get to see in that rent revenue account for retail, here's all of the tenants and leases that hit that for this month. And now if I want to go a bit further, I can even drill in on one of the given amounts because I'm sure I'm not billing just rent. And now I can see everything that was billed for that month. Property tax, insurance, and CAM were also billed. You'll also notice I can see here what was the total, what's been paid, and as I scroll out to the right, when was it paid and how was it paid? So all of your detailed cash application takes place here as well. One other quick note on tenant or resident payments. There are tenant portals available for tenants to go in and make all of those payments online. We can hook the portal to your website. They can log in, they can view their account, they can even raise disputes if you'd like them to as well. And then all of that gets captured. And when they record those payments, that data flows automatically over to the accounts receivable module and therefore updates Sage Intacct Real Estate. So now that we've seen that information, same type of thing on the expense side. If I want to know where this electrical expense comes from, I can easily drill into that, see the bill that has come in, who it came in from, all of the details with it. I can even put in an attachment of the bill and use the routing for approvals so that we can automatically have all of that done right inside Sage Intacct. So all that detail gets captured here and very easy for you to get to. Now, similarly, as I scroll down here, I can look at income statements a few other ways as well. And these aren't our only limitations, but these are the most common requests that we have from customers on a per square foot basis. So I can see month and year, what was our revenue, what was our expense, and how does that look like per square foot? What about net operating income year over year? So now I can see this month, this year versus that same month last year, and where our differences came into play. And of course, last but not least, when compared against a budget. So now I can certainly see my actual versus budget and my variance on a current month basis, also on a year to date. We could easily go in and add columns for percentages of variances, all of those types of things, and make it easy for you to get to it. And all of this data is readily exportable out to Excel. So I did not mention that or show this to you, but certainly if I drill in here to anything, if I hit export and go to Excel, what we'll notice is it formats everything properly. I'm not dealing with any of those pesky merged fields or anything like that I want to make sure that I can see. So it's easy for me then to open up this report. And I always like to point out just a couple little things here. So yes, it formats everything correctly for me. So dates are dates, amounts are amounts. But it even goes through to make sure that it tells us what our filter options were. So what property or entity were we looking at, and what dates were we looking at? So it pulls all of that into the Excel spreadsheet as well, right with it. So easy to get to all of that information. All right, let's take this a step further. So next, let's go run through the real estate module and all the different features and functions within it. Now, I should tell you at this moment today, Sage Intacct Real Estate, when you go in and start it from here inside Sage Intacct, it simply launches it as its own tab. We are changing that with the next release, which actually happens this weekend. So after this weekend, Sage Intacct Real Estate, all the features and functions will be right here inside Sage Intacct. Now, once I get to the real estate module itself, now when I click on the menu, I see my task menu. So these are all of the things I do on a routine basis. I might go in and handle some charges. I might generate charges for the first of a given month. I might generate our late fees. I might calculate management fees or track all my leases, my move-ins and move-outs and addendums and all of that. Talk about security deposits and so on, percentage rent capability and recoveries. And when I go under setup, this is where I begin to build all of the data in there. So I start by building my properties. And you'll notice whenever I open up a list inside Sage Intacct, I'm able to filter and sort on any of those columns. And it's not a filter where I have to type the beginning of a name. I can just go in and type any portion of a name and it finds it for me. If I go in now and hit edit, it opens up the setup screens for that property. And now I get to see what property it is, what entity does it relate to, if there's a department involved when we're trying to route things for approvals and so on, we can track that. How many units does it have, and what's occupied, and what future leases are out there to occupy other units. What types of properties do we track? It's user definable, so literally anything that you'd like to make sure, any property type we can handle. And then we talk about occupancy, and do we want to track it based upon when the space is leased or when it's physically occupied, the start date and the end date of those. We can track vacancy loss for all of your residential properties. We go through and we also identify all of the contacts with the property. Now, these are not tenant contacts. We'll talk about those in a minute. These are all of your contacts. It might be your property manager, your leasing broker, a subcontractor who does work there. And all of that gets tracked in here with email addresses, because we can then create what are called smart rules or smart events to send information to those various contacts. Next, we see our square footages. And here we're going to track all the different square footage types that would be important to you. Once again, user definable, the value and the as of date. So we realize that a building's common area may change. So therefore, the denominator for your recoveries might change. But that happens at a certain point in time. So that now becomes your new denominator for any new leases, while the existing rentable square footage continues to be the denominator that you use for any leases that are in force. Next, we have our charge controls. So within Sage Intacct Real Estate, completely user-defined list of item IDs. In Sage 300, this was referred to as charge types. So therefore, you can go through and create whatever list you might want to have for all of those different types of items that you'd like to bill for. We identify if they're part of base rent, meaning we want to see them on a rent roll. Are they subject to management fees? Because I may not charge a management fee on all the different types of charges. And are they subject to late fees? We also track deposits, security deposits, last month's rent, pet fees, all of those types of things. And then we get into some information here at the property level that then gets copied over to each individual lease. So first we talk about late fees. So we can go through and we can create the way we would like the late fee to be billed. There can be multiple steps in your late fee calculation. You tell it if it's a fee and how often to charge that, daily, monthly, every so many days. And what's it based upon? A flat amount, a percentage, a greater of a flat amount or a lesser of? It allows us to track those details. And what sort of grace days we have. So we build this at the property level, but once again, everything is customizable at the lease level. Next, we can go to our checklist. I'll come back to management fees. What things do we need to know about that happen whenever a new lease is started? So we then go through and move this over to each lease as we start it. And we are going to add the capability of putting a contact on those so we can make sure those people are reminded what steps are theirs to complete and then track when they're actually completed. And the same with your termination dates. Okay, management fees. So from a management fee perspective, we can go through and build all the detail about the management fee. When does it start? If we stop managing the property, we can put in an end date. And then we tell it how to create the calculation. Is it based upon all of the payments related to those management fee charges? Or is it based upon charge amounts or all charges, all payments? And we can add other calculations there if needed. We then tell it, let's come up with all those payments, and it's 5% of that total with a minimum of $4,000. We also then identify what accounts payable vendor we'd hit and what expense and debit accounts to hit in here as well. We also go through and track in detail all the tax information on the property, the PIN number, the state, the county, all the values associated with it. We track the insurance for the property. Now we'll also have this at the lease level, but we track this at the property. And what you'll notice in here is that we can identify what types of insurance we need, and then who we want to notify and when with reminders of those certificates of insurance that we need to see. So we can put 2 different email addresses in, and we'll do this once again at the lease level also, so that we can have the system send an automatic email out on that notification date to make sure we get that new certificate of insurance supplied. And then we can go in and add attachments. So we do have the ability to add any type of attachment here that you'd like and track that through. You'll see attachments also at the unit level, tenant level, and lease level. So we kind of have it all the way through. All right, let's go on. So we've set up our property, then we get into our units. And within our units, we have all of our different detail here that we track. And we go in and we identify the unit ID and the name. What type of unit is it? If it's a residential property, we can go in and start to build all of our different floor plan options in. So we can go through and give it a studio, 1 by 1, 2 by 2, so on and so forth. So we can then identify all the floor plans with it. And then all of the address information, the system's going to track for us market rent and current rent automatically, and all the square footage information that we'd like to track at the unit level also. And then lastly, attachments here too. Now, one thing I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, and that is the duplicate button. So if you've got a new property that you need to bring on, and it's got 100 units, you can easily use this duplicate feature to go in and create the units that you need, and then just make the changes that are necessary for each individual unit. So now we've got our property, our unit. Let's next look at our tenant or resident. So what you'll notice is inside Sage Intacct Real Estate, we simply have a list of everybody, and it's really all their contact information. So now I can go in here and I can see all of the contact information for this particular tenant. I know some of you out there might be thinking, hang on a minute, we need way more than one contact per tenant. Not a problem. Inside the tenant screen, inside accounts receivable, you'll have all sorts of capability here to go in and add additionals if you'd like to. So if you notice I hit edit, all of that same main contact info is here on the first screen. But then when I go to my contact list, I can go in and add as many contacts as I need. Okay? All right. Let's continue on here. So all of that detail goes through. Next, now we'll build the lease. And the lease is where we're going to join that tenant and unit information together. So we'll go in here under this particular lease. We've got what property it's for, the lease name, that's user definable as well. Who's my tenant or tenants? So very easy to go in and add additional tenants if needed here. Then I have the ability to identify the unit or units that need to be added into a given lease also. Very quick, very easy. Then we track some important date information. Lease commencement date, when does the lease end, when does move-in take place, certificate of occupancy if we want to track it, and lease execution. Next, we'll build all of those recurring charges. Once again, I said it earlier, we want to make sure that we capture all of the potential revenue available within this lease so that we can maximize our net operating income. So I go under my rent charge, I hit my charge amounts, and here's where I'm able to go through and build all of my rent steps or bumps inside here. And not everything has to be monthly. You certainly have the ability to do all different types of frequencies in here. Notice there is even a one-time capability. So if you have a 1-month rent concession or something like that, it's easy for you to utilize that feature when setting up those things. If you have percentage rent, we do have full percentage rent capability where you can identify by types of store what you're tracking, all the billing that would go on with it, and then all the detailed calculations. All of your breakpoint tables with effective dates, caps, sales base, all of those types of pieces are available in here. Now, when it comes to our various recoveries, I have the ability to go over here. Once again, if I look at the charges, this may be what I'm billing in an estimate. And then once I've billing it as an estimate, I can go in and identify all of the recovery settings. Let me look here and see if I did it under CAM. Did not. Let's go back to property tax. So I have the ability to choose from a template. So when I go in and build from a template, the system will then allow me to pull in all of that information so I do not have to go through and do it one by one. So I can come in here and identify when is the recovery being run for, how many decimal places would we like that pro rata share to go out to, and what expense categories should we hit? Now, these are completely user definable. So I can go in here and say, well, I want to show RE taxes. And are they fixed or do they vary with occupancy? Are they subject to an admin fee, which they rarely are, for property taxes? And how should I come up with it? What square footages should I use? Or do I want to just key in a manual percentage? And then what GL accounts do we go through and track that over to? So I'm able to go through and identify all of those items that I want inside that expense category or expense pool. So there's a lot of capability here, and with those templates, you do not have to build these one by one by one. You can copy them into a lease and then just make some changes to it. And when I scroll down to the bottom, here's where I'm able to go through and identify my base years, my stops, my caps, all of those types of things here inside the system. Now, by tracking all of that recovery, I was actually working on one a little bit ago. What I'm able to do then is come in and use the recovery capability. I can pull in the actual expenses from the GL and review them. Then I can post them into the system. So if I need to make a marketing decision or something like that, I can do that. And then I can run the actual reconciliation. If anybody wants to see this all the way through, I'll give you my contact info at the end of the presentation. Feel free to reach out to me. I can choose the lease or leases I want to do this for. And then when I hit preview, the system goes through and runs that reconciliation for me. So what it's doing here is it's looking at the expense categories, what the actual amounts were in the GL that were posted. It's making an adjustment because they did not occupy the space for the entire year. They're not in for the first 4 days of the year. And then it tracks to their detailed share and looks to see what their share is, what did we bill them in an estimate, and what's our reconciliation charge. And so then all of that gets sent to the tenant with that charge. So this worksheet goes over to the accounts receivable system as well. So you always have all of your backup there, easy for you to always go back and see exactly what happened, when, where, why, and track that all the way through. All right, some other features in here that are important. I mentioned late fees. This is where they can be customized for this particular tenant. Security deposits. Did we bill it to them? Have they paid it? Is there a letter of credit? We can track all of that. The tenant insurance information. So in here, I have the ability as well to go in and identify what type of requirements we have. Maybe who this is with, any policy number, what's the email address that we have on file for them, a phone number, when does it go into effect, and when does it expire, and what are the required values for them to have. And our notification date. Well, I probably want to become aware of this around the middle of November, so that way I get an email. And this way, with 2 email fields, we can email the tenant as well as the property manager if you'd like, along those lines. Then we have our detailed lease clauses. So in here, we can track information around any lease clause that you want to be aware of. And with all of these, we identify a notification date, an expiration date, who we should know, who we should email, a description, and also a very detailed note if we'd like to take that down as well. Okay, so that's how we establish our leases. Now we might go into administer and actually do some billing. So if we go into our generate scheduled charges, I'll go in here and tell it the next month I'd like to do. Identify that and what property I'd like to do it for. We'll hit preview. And now it shows me suite by suite all of the charges that it's going to go through and bill. So it identifies all of those for me in detail, and I can see all of that. If I want to send this out to Excel, easy enough for me to do. I just hit it, export to Excel, and now once again, all of that is formatted for me properly. I can route it for comments, approvals, those types of things. Otherwise, I can simply choose to hit generate charges, and when I do that, the system goes through and generates all of those details for me within here. All right, let's go in and let's do Columbia Place, because the one I chose maybe isn't the best example. All right, we'll hit preview. There we go, that's a little better. It has more ranges of charges, so I'd rather see that way. And I've got all the details available here. All right, okay. Now, once we've done that and sent that information over, if I come in, didn't mean to do that. If I come in and go in and look at all of my real estate invoices, I see all of those amounts come through here for me. And if I go in and hit view or edit, here's the detailed charges for all of those coming over. So it's very easy for me to see. And we do have a full detailed audit trail that tells me who did this, when, where, and if any changes are ever made to it. So if somebody has the security capability to make an edit, which there's quite a few options in here to make that not possible, but then you are able to see who did it when, what was the old value, what was the new value. We do track all of that detail. Similarly, I could go in and bill late fees. Our tenant chargeback option, that was asked for specifically by some Sage 300 CRE customers. We've added that capability. So if we have a bill that comes in that we need to pay to a vendor in accounts payable, but we want to bill that back to a specific tenant on a one-off, we can do that all in one step on that tenant chargeback screen. We then have the ability to do the detailed management fee calculation, see our security deposits. We've talked about percentage rent and about recoveries and all the capabilities that are there. Next, if we go into our reports, and let's say we want to get a quick look at maybe a lease abstract, I'm going to go in and identify, I'm just going to go in and grab one particular lease that I think is the best option here for us. And maybe I want to see it as of today. We'll hit start. So now here's everything about that lease, and I can see when did my lease start, when does it expire, when did move-in take place, who's my tenant info, what space or spaces do they have, their current recurring charges that I see in detail here per square foot as well, if they have expense recoveries, and then any of those lease options. So in this case, they've got a renewal option that we're looking to track, and they also have 10 assigned parking spaces that we want to be aware of. So that's an example of a lease abstract. And then also we should look at a rent roll. So we'll go in and identify the property that we're after here. And notice I can hit select all if I'd like to. And let's back this up a little bit so we can see some bump ups in place. And now what I'm able to see is the total units, the vacant units, square footage vacant, how many units, total square footage. And then I can see space by space, who's my tenant, when did they move in, when do they expire, and then all of their charges on a monthly basis per foot, an annual basis per foot, and all the bump ups that they have coming. So it's a very comprehensive rent roll. And yes, you probably expected this can also be directly sent to Excel also, so that all of that information is right there at your fingertips, easy, ready to go. All right, well, that's kind of my detailed presentation of the product itself. Let's go back here to our slides. And now we'll talk about our upcoming releases. So for those of you that are not familiar, Sage Intacct does releases that you could set your watch by. They do 4 releases every year. They do them in February, as I already mentioned. This release comes out this weekend, and we'll be embedding all of the real estate functionality inside the regular menus and adding some custom reporting capability. In May, we plan on adding lease renewal options. So for all of you that manage residential properties and you'd like to give your residents the ability of having multiple renewal options, we'll automate that process. Then we'll be working with the folks from Sage Field Operations to integrate field maintenance in with Sage Intacct Real Estate. And in November, we'll be looking to add the CPI capability into the system.
Dom, thank you for presenting. Any parting words for the audience?
No, just said thanks very much for your time. And if you're looking for more information, please reach out.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.